Every year when autumn arrives, I watch the same ritual play out. Piles of branches and fallen limbs are dragged into heaps, soaked with fuel, and set ablaze. In a few careless hours, what could have nourished the ground for generations vanishes into smoke. Along with it goes stored rainwater, heat, and fertility that nature spent decades collecting. For most people, this feels normal, necessary even. But once I learned what I'm about to share with you, I could never see those fires the same way again. Because somewhere far from suburbia and far from convenience, one farmer chose a completely different path. Instead of burning wood, he buried it. Instead of flattening land, he shaped it. And while snow clung to the hills around him, lemon trees ripened in open air. No greenhouse, no irrigation lines, no chemical inputs, just earth, wood, and time working together. That single decision created a living system that fed crops for more than 2 decades without exhaustion. No hoses to drag, no fertilizer bills, no yearly battle with drought. And once I understood how it worked, one question kept echoing in my mind. If this method is so powerful, why did we turn our backs on it? The answer does not flatter modern farming. The man behind this story never intended to challenge authority. I will call him Daniel Morgan, because his lesson belongs in every backyard, not just one mountain valley. Daniel did not seek conflict. He simply paid attention. He watched how forests handled storms without erosion, how fallen trees slowly transformed into soil, how slopes held water instead of shedding it. In the early 1980s, on a steep, rocky property in the western United States, that quiet observation put him on a collision course with the system. Officials began arriving unannounced. They carried clipboards, measuring tapes, and warnings. They scrutinized the terraces Daniel carved into the hills and the ponds he dug without permits. Every mound of soil, every buried log, every curve in the land that refused to be flat earned him another citation. His neighbors followed the handbook. Straight rows, bare soil, approved crops only. Daniel built hills from rotting timber and planted citrus trees where only grass and evergreens had survived. Authorities called it irresponsible. They warned of landslides, flooding, and disorder. They said nature needed control. Fines arrived relentlessly, sometimes dozens in a single year. Before long, Daniel earned a reputation that followed him everywhere. He used to laugh about it quietly. "I am not a successful farmer," he would say. "I am the most fined farmer in this county." The penalties mounted, thousands of dollars, then more. Each notice demanded he undo the work and return the land to compliance. But he kept going. Even as officials hinted the property could be taken from him, he continued building the mounds. After one season of heavy rain in the mid-1980s, the county accused him of illegally holding water. They claimed his earthworks were dangerous. Daniel paid the fine and appealed, explaining that his terraces slowed runoff and reduced erosion. He argued that his ponds prevented flooding instead of causing it. No one listened. By the end of the decade, the pressure reached a breaking point. The Agricultural Board threatened seizure. Daniel did not argue. He invited them to walk the land. They saw citrus trees loaded with fruit. They saw kiwi vines climbing beside pine trees. They saw grapes and root crops thriving on slopes that once grew nothing but thin grass. His harvests were not marginally better. They were extraordinary, nearly 10 times what surrounding farms produced on flat, irrigated ground. By the early 1990s, After yet another citation for expanding a pond, the evidence had become impossible to ignore. Daniel later wrote that his crops spoke when words failed. Lemon branches bowed under their own weight. Vegetables flourished without irrigation or chemical fertilizer. Each find became confirmation that the land itself was on his side. The penalties never truly stopped, but neither did he. And while the paperwork piled up, the soil grew darker, softer, and richer each year. His certainty only deepened. Nature does not rush, but it does not lose. This is not just a story about resisting authority. It is a story about trusting decay, about believing in fallen wood, about allowing time to work quietly underground. It is about listening to land instead of forcing it to obey. On Daniel's mountainside, lemons sway in freezing wind, their bright skins glowing against snow. Kiwi vines climb among evergreens, swelling with fruit under cold skies. Grapes ripen where neighboring fields struggle to stay green. There are no hoses here, no sprinklers ticking through the night. The water rises from within the land itself, drawn upward by roots that plunge deep into buried wood. The soil is loose and dark, carrying the rich scent of decomposition. Frost settles early, sometimes before October ends, yet the ground beneath the citrus remains warm. Even in midwinter, green shoots push upward, fed by the gentle heat released as logs slowly break down below. These trees are not fragile. They are strong, glossy, and heavy with fruit. Crops normally reserved for warmer regions thrive here beside mountain evergreens. Harvest baskets fill with colors that seem impossible at this elevation. Lemons, grapes, figs. Neighbors stop and stare. Inspectors who once arrived with citations now arrive with cameras. The proof stands in plain sight. Where others see exhausted hillsides, Daniel gathers abundance. There are no hidden pipes, no artificial tricks. The secret lies beneath the surface. Each mound is built like a forest floor, layered with logs, branches, and leaves, then sealed with soil. As the wood decays, it absorbs rain and snowmelt, swelling like a sponge. Roots tap into that reserve through dry months. Even during drought years, the beds remain moist. Crops survive heat waves and late frosts that destroy nearby fields. And the mounds do far more than store water. As the buried logs slowly surrender to time, something remarkable begins to happen beneath the surface. The wood does not simply disappear. It transforms. As it breaks down, it releases a long, steady supply of nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, calcium, feeding the soil year after year, not in a rush, but in a quiet, dependable flow. This is not a single-season boost. It is a slow inheritance that can last for decades. Even more surprising is the heat. Decomposition generates warmth, gentle but persistent. On the coldest nights, when frost grips the land, that stored heat lingers below ground. It keeps roots active. It delays freezing. It stretches the growing season weeks beyond what the open valley floor can manage. Each mound becomes its own climate system, a pocket of southern abundance carved into a cold mountain world. When visitors walk these terraces for the first time, disbelief comes first. They taste lemons grown outdoors, fruit that never knew the protection of glass or plastic. They push their fingers into soil that stays cool and damp even in the heat of midsummer. For more than 20 years, these beds have delivered harvest after harvest without irrigation, without synthetic fertilizer, without the chemical supports modern farming depends on. The evidence does not live in charts or theories. It hangs from branches, it fills baskets, it smells sweet, and tastes impossible. according to the rules we were taught. At the center of every mound lies a truth most of us were never taught to see. Rotting wood is not just organic matter, it is a reservoir, not symbolically, physically. Wood is built from an intricate internal framework, a maze of microscopic channels formed by its cell walls. As decay begins, fungi and microbes widen those pathways. What was once dense becomes porous. Rainwater and snowmelt seep inside, filling chamber after chamber. Laboratory testing confirms what farmers have observed for generations. Heavily decomposed pine can absorb water equal to 5 times its dry weight, more than 500%. Even slower decaying hardwoods like oak can double or triple their mass with moisture. This is not gardening folklore, it is measurable physics. From above, a mound looks ordinary. Soil, mulch, maybe squash vines spilling over the edges. But when a moisture probe is driven deep into the heart of the mound, the story changes. In the height of July, when neighboring gardens wilt and hoses run morning and night, the probe slides down and reads moisture levels that match freshly watered soil. Field measurements consistently show 40 to 60% moisture inside the mound, even during dry spells. While the surface may crack under the sun, the buried wood below remains swollen with stored water, releasing it slowly, patiently, directly to the roots. Every storm refills the system. Every snowfall adds to the reserve. The mound becomes a hidden cistern, invisible but dependable. The real magic lies in how decay changes density. As fungi hollow out the wood structure, weight drops dramatically. A piece of pine that once sank in water becomes light and airy, almost buoyant. In one documented study, degraded pine fell to just 0.18 grams per cubic centimeter, less than half its original density. Each gram of that softened wood can hold multiple grams of water. Even after months without rain, roots find moisture where the eye sees only dust. For gardeners, the implications are profound. It means freedom from dragging hoses across the yard every evening. It means summers without curled leaves, without panic watering, without watching crops fail during heat waves. This is not optimism. It is engineering built by nature itself. Every log placed in the mound increases capacity. Every branch adds storage. Every handful of leaves deepens resilience. Over time, the mound settles and reshapes, but its core remains alive, functioning as a long-term water bank. Stories from those who build these systems echo the same quiet astonishment. In the Pacific Northwest, one gardener reported that by the second growing season, she stopped watering altogether. The soil stayed moist from spring through fall. On mountain terraces like Daniel's, the land held water through droughts that drained neighboring wells dry. Once you understand what is happening beneath your feet, the idea of burning wood begins to feel almost unthinkable. I have watched the same pattern repeat itself far from mountain farms and open countryside. In tight city lots, where gardeners work with nothing but pruned street branches and logs pulled from the curb, the same transformation unfolds. As heat waves roll in, their beds remain green, leaves stay open, soil stays cool, not a single drop of extra water is added. While surrounding gardens struggle, these mounds carry on quietly, drawing strength from what lies beneath. This is the promise that attracts both the practical gardener and the frugal one. Build it once, and the system carries itself forward. The mound does the watering. The buried wood does not shout or spray or leak. It quenches thirst silently from below. The proof is easy to feel. Push a moisture probe into the mound after weeks without rain, and the numbers rise. Dig with bare hands and pull them back damp. There is no trick here, no hidden pipes. Only the physical behavior of wood, lignin, and decay working exactly as nature designed. Below the surface of every mound, a quiet machine runs without pause. The moment the first layer of soil covers the logs, the system becomes more than a water bank. It becomes a heater. Microbes and fungi rush into the moist wood, feeding on lignin and cellulose. Their work releases energy, heat, slow and steady. Every fragment of wood consumed sends a small pulse of warmth outward into the soil. This process never makes noise, never produces smoke, yet it changes everything. In the depths of winter, when air temperatures plunge, the soil above buried logs remains noticeably warmer than the surrounding ground. Thermometers placed in these mounds consistently read several degrees higher than nearby flat fields. That warmth is not a luxury. It is a survival edge. Seeds wake earlier in spring. Roots remain active longer. Frost that blackens young shoots in bare soil glides over these mounds without harm, softened by the steady heat rising from below. In the fall, gardens built this way refuse to shut down on schedule. Tomatoes ripen late. Squash keeps swelling. While neighboring beds collapse under cold nights, these mounds continue producing, quietly extending the season by weeks. And the heat is only the opening act. As years pass, the buried wood shifts roles. What began as fuel becomes savings. The breakdown of logs is slow, deliberate, and measured in decades. Hardwoods like oak and maple can take 20 years or more to fully decompose. Throughout that time, they release nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, calcium, at a pace plants can actually use. There is no sudden flush followed by depletion, no spike and crash, just a steady, dependable flow. Each spring, roots push deeper, discovering new pockets of nourishment. Each autumn, the mound settles slightly, its interior darker, richer, and more biologically active than the year before. Long-term field trials in mature gardens confirm what I saw firsthand on those terraces. A properly built mound can sustain crops for 20 years or more without additional fertilizer. The nutrients do not wash away with heavy rain. They do not burn off in summer heat. They remain locked inside the wood, released only as microbes complete their slow work. Soil tests taken from the heart of old mounds routinely show higher nitrogen and phosphorus levels than the surrounding ground, even after a decade or more. This is not fast agriculture. It is patient wealth, built quietly, paid out slowly. And once you understand that, the idea of hauling away logs or burning branches begins to feel like throwing away an inheritance. I do not think of this method as a solution anymore. I think of it as a long conversation with the land, one that does not end in a single season or even a decade. It is not designed for speed. It is designed for endurance. What happens inside these mounds is not sudden or dramatic. It is patient, layered, and precise. As the buried wood continues its slow collapse, it becomes a living framework, a kind of underground scaffolding where life organizes itself. Fungal threads stretch outward like fine wire, linking log to soil, soil to root, root to leaf. They move minerals upward, quietly redistributing wealth from deep inside the mound to the smallest growing tip above. Bacteria follow close behind, dismantling complex materials into simple, usable forms. Earthworms arrive when the wood softens enough to yield, carving tunnels, blending soil and decay, and leaving behind castings so dense with nutrients they function like concentrated meals for plants. No single organism runs the system. Each works independently. Together, they turn what was once dead timber into a self-renewing engine of fertility. For me, this changes the role of the gardener entirely. Each year asks less of my hands and gives more back in return. There are no bags to haul, no formulas to calculate, no fear of exhausting the soil. Feeding, warming, and watering all happen beneath the surface, without supervision. The mound does not need reminders. It does not forget. This kind of gardening demands something modern culture rarely encourages: patience and trust. Trust that decay is not loss. Trust that slow systems outperform fast ones over time. Hugelkultur does not promise instant abundance. It promises something better, soil that improves itself year after year. So how did we lose something so effective? The answer arrived on steel wheels. When large machines took over agriculture in the 20th century, the land was forced to change shape. Hills and irregularities became problems. Tractors needed smooth ground. Harvesters needed uninterrupted rows. Anything that slowed metal was erased. Mounds were flattened. Brush piles were burned. Landscapes were shaved into efficiency. The goal shifted from resilience to speed, from longevity to output per hour. The buried systems that once held water and nutrients disappeared, not because they failed, but because they could not be mechanized. What replaced them were fields that looked clean and uniform, yet depended entirely on outside inputs to survive. Fertilizer replaced biology. Irrigation replaced memory. Rebuilding this system does not require advanced tools, but it does require discipline. I begin directly on top of living grass. The first layer always matters most. The largest, oldest, most decomposed logs form the base. Hardwoods, oak, maple, are ideal because they break down slowly, feeding the soil for decades instead of seasons. Cedar, walnut, or treated wood never belong here. They release compounds that suppress roots and halt biological activity. The logs are stacked tightly, not casually. Every empty space becomes a future collapse point. Smaller branches are wedged into gaps until the structure feels solid. Then comes the part that determines success or failure. Nitrogen must be added deliberately. Fresh grass clippings, manure, green plant waste, even diluted urine. Rotting wood consumes nitrogen before it releases anything back. Skip this step and the microbes will take what they need from your plants instead. The result is pale leaves, stalled growth, and disappointment. Once the green layer is complete, the mound is sealed with soil and mulch. Water generously during the first year while the system establishes itself. After that, intervention fades into the background. I have seen what happens when this is done correctly. A retired teacher stands beside her garden with a hose that has not moved since her second spring. Her mound was built from storm-downed maple logs, every gap packed with grass and manure. Even in August heat, the soil remains cool and damp. She laughs that her tomatoes receive more water from underground than from the faucet. Her water usage dropped so sharply that the city contacted her to check for leaks. In another yard, a careful homeowner transformed a brush pile into a winding mound that cuts through his lawn. He tracked every expense. Fertilizer purchases vanished. Weekly watering stopped. Kitchen scraps and fallen leaves became the only inputs. By the end of the first season, his harvest surpassed anything he had grown before. The savings paid for next year's seeds twice over. Mistakes happened too. One grower trusted the wood alone and skipped the nitrogen layer. The plants responded immediately, yellowed and stalled. The correction was simple but unforgettable. Compost and fresh greens restored balance. Within weeks, the bed rebounded. That failure became confirmation. Today, the same mound grows peas and squash effortlessly. The stories repeat themselves across climates and cities. Bury the wood. Let time work. The land responds. Meanwhile, droughts intensify. Fertilizer costs climb. And still, millions of branches are burned every year. Branches that could become reservoirs, heaters, and nutrient banks beneath our feet. This choice is not about returning to the past. It is about preparing for a future where resilience matters more than speed. Soil remembers how it is treated. It carries that memory forward long after we are gone. The only question left is this: what will your ground remember?